Blood soaked the hem of her dress as she stumbled into Manassas, Colorado, that sweltering afternoon in August 1882. Barely able to stand, clutching nothing but a torn valise and memories that would haunt her until her dying breath. Sarah Everett had walked nearly 20 miles through unforgiving terrain after the stagecoach she'd been traveling in had been ambushed, leaving the driver and 2 other passengers dead in a ravine while she'd hidden beneath luggage, trembling and silent, waiting for the outlaws to take what they wanted and leave. They'd taken everything of value, including her faith that anyone in this world could be trusted. The main street of Manassas stretched before her like a mirage, wooden buildings shimmering in the afternoon heat. She could feel curious eyes on her as she made her way toward what looked like a general store, her boots leaving small clouds of dust with each unsteady step. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins, hanging in tangled waves past her shoulders, and her traveling dress, once a respectable shade of gray, was now stained with dirt and dried blood that wasn't her own. "Miss, you look like you could use some help." The voice came from behind her, deep and calm, without the edge of threat she'd learned to recognize in men's voices during her 21 years of life. Sarah spun around, swaying slightly, and found herself looking up at a man who stood well over 6 feet tall, his broad shoulders blocking out the sun. He wore the practical clothing of a working rancher, dusty denim pants, and a simple cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned, muscular forearms. His face was weathered but kind, with lines around his blue eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he wasn't smiling now. Concern creased his brow as he took in her disheveled appearance. "I'm fine," Sarah said automatically, the lie coming as naturally as breathing. She'd learned early that showing weakness invited predators. "No disrespect, miss, but you don't look fine. You look like you've been through something terrible." He held up his hands in a gesture of peace, taking a careful step back to give her space. "My name is Cole Carson. I own a ranch about 5 miles outside town. If you need help, food, or just a place to sit down and catch your breath, I'm offering it with no strings attached." Sarah studied him with eyes that had learned to read men quickly. Cole Carson looked to be in his late 20s, maybe 30 at most. There was dirt under his fingernails and dust on his boots, the signs of honest work rather than idle lounging in saloons. But she'd been fooled before. Her father had looked respectable too, right up until he'd gambled away their family farm and drunk himself to death, leaving her mother to work herself into an early grave trying to keep food on the table. "Why would you help a stranger?" Sarah asked, her voice sharper than she'd intended. "What do you want from me?" Cole's expression didn't change, though something flickered in his eyes that might have been understanding. "I don't want anything from you, miss. I'm offering because you clearly need help, and in my experience, walking past someone in trouble makes you just as guilty as the person who caused that trouble in the first place." "In my experience, every offer comes with a price," Sarah replied, wrapping her arms around herself despite the heat. "Every promise gets broken eventually. Every person who says they'll be there disappears when things get hard." "Then your experience has been with the wrong kind of people," Cole said quietly, "but I understand why you'd be wary. Tell you what, why don't you at least let me walk you to the doctor's office? That blood on your dress, I need to know you're not injured." Sarah looked down at her dress, at the dark stains that had dried stiff in the heat. "It's not mine. The stagecoach I was on got ambushed this morning about 20 miles south of here. The driver and 2 passengers were killed. I hid and they didn't find me. After they left, I started walking." Cole's jaw tightened. "Did you see which direction the outlaws headed? North, I think." "But I'm not sure. I was too scared to look properly." The admission of fear came out before she could stop it, and she hated herself for the weakness. "There's no shame in being scared when men are killing people right in front of you," Cole said firmly. "But we need to tell the sheriff about this. He'll want to form a posse, try to track them down before they hit another coach or a homestead." Sarah nodded slowly, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming her. The adrenaline that had kept her moving for hours was draining away, leaving her hollow and shaking. Her legs gave out without warning, and she would have collapsed in the street if Cole hadn't moved with surprising speed, catching her before she hit the ground. "Easy now," he said, his voice gentle as he steadied her. "When's the last time you ate or drank anything?" "Yesterday evening, I think. Before we stopped at the way station for the night." Sarah tried to pull away from his supporting arm, but her body refused to cooperate. "I can walk. Just give me a moment." "I'm sure you can, but there's no need to prove anything right now." Cole adjusted his grip, taking more of her weight. "The sheriff's office is just up the street. We'll get you some water, report the attack, and then figure out what you need next. One step at a time." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle everything herself, but the truth was she couldn't. She'd been running on fear and determination for hours, and both had finally run out. So she let this stranger help her walk down the dusty street, past the curious stares of townspeople, toward a building with a wooden sign that read "Sheriff's Office." The sheriff turned out to be a grizzled man in his 50s named Tom Wheeler, with a salt and pepper mustache and eyes that had seen too much violence. He listened intently as Sarah recounted the ambush, asking occasional questions about the number of attackers and their descriptions. Cole stood quietly by the door, having fetched her a cup of water from a pitcher in the corner. "We've had reports of a gang working this area for the past month," Sheriff Wheeler said grimly when Sarah finished her story. "4 men, all wearing bandanas over their faces. They've hit 2 other stagecoaches and a freight wagon, killed the drivers each time, took everything of value. You're the first survivor I've heard about." Sarah felt sick. "I didn't help them. I just hid like a coward while they murdered innocent people." "You survived," the sheriff said bluntly. "And now you've given me information that might help us catch these men before they kill anyone else. That's not nothing, miss. What's your name and where were you headed?" "Sarah Everett. I was traveling to Alamosa to work as a school teacher. The school board hired me through correspondence after I sent them my credentials and references." She pulled the now crumpled letter from her valise, grateful that the outlaws hadn't taken it. "I was supposed to start in 2 weeks, once the school term begins." Sheriff Wheeler examined the letter and nodded. "That's about 30 miles north of here. You planning to continue on?" Sarah hesitated. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to keep moving, to not stay in one place long enough for trouble to find her. But she was exhausted, traumatized, and had lost what little money she'd had in the robbery. "I don't have the stage fare anymore. They took my coin purse. The stage company might arrange passage for you once they hear what happened," the sheriff suggested. "But that could take a few days to sort out. You need somewhere to stay in the meantime." Before Sarah could answer, Cole spoke up. "My ranch has a guest room. My mother lives with me, so there'd be a proper chaperone. You'd be welcome to stay until you're ready to continue your journey, Miss Everett. No charge and no expectations." Sarah turned to look at him, suspicion flaring automatically. "Why would you do that? You don't know me." "Because you need help and I'm in a position to give it," Cole said simply. "I know you have no reason to trust me, but I give you my word that you'd be safe at the Carson Ranch. My mother would be happy for the company. She complains I don't bring enough civilized conversation home." Sheriff Wheeler cleared his throat. "For what it's worth, Miss Everett, Cole Carson is one of the most honest men in this territory. If he says you'd be safe, You would be. But it's your choice, of course. Sarah looked between the two men, trying to read any hidden agenda, any sign of the kind of manipulation she'd learned to expect. But all she saw was genuine concern in Cole's eyes and professional respect in the sheriff's. She was so tired of being suspicious, tired of running, tired of believing the worst of everyone because experience had taught her to. Just until I can arrange passage to Alamosa, she heard herself say. A few days at most. Cole nodded, his expression relieved. That's fine. I'll need to stop by the general store for supplies and then we can head out to the ranch. It's about an hour's ride in the wagon. After giving Sheriff Wheeler a few more details about the location of the ambush, Sarah followed Cole out of the office. The afternoon sun was starting to sink lower in the sky, painting the mountains in the distance with shades of gold and amber. Despite the beauty of the landscape, Sarah felt only wariness as Cole helped her up onto the seat of a sturdy wagon hitched to two patient-looking horses. The ride to the Carson ranch passed mostly in silence. Sarah was too exhausted to make conversation, and Cole seemed content to let her rest. She dozed fitfully, jerking awake each time the wagon hit a rut in the road, her heart racing until she remembered where she was. Each time, Cole would glance at her with concern but say nothing, giving her space to collect herself. The ranch, when they finally arrived, was more substantial than Sarah had expected. A solid two-story house stood at the center of the property, built from good timber that had weathered to a silvery gray. A large barn, several outbuildings, and a network of corrals suggested this was a working cattle operation, not some small homestead barely scraping by. Horses grazed in a nearby pasture, and Sarah could see cattle dotting the hillsides in the distance. A woman emerged from the house as the wagon pulled up, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked to be in her early 50s, with threads of silver in her dark hair and the same kind eyes as her son. "Cole, you're back earlier than I expected, and you've brought a guest." "Mama, this is Miss Sarah Everett. She was on the stagecoach that got hit by those outlaws this morning. She needs a place to stay for a few days while she arranges passage to Alamosa." Cole climbed down from the wagon and moved to help Sarah, but she managed to get down on her own, determined to show she wasn't completely helpless. Mrs. Carson's expression shifted immediately to sympathy and concern. "You poor dear. Come inside right away. You look absolutely exhausted." "Cole, bring her bag, and put those supplies away before coming in for supper." Before Sarah could protest or even properly introduce herself, she found herself being ushered into the house by Mrs. Carson's gentle but firm hands. The interior was clean and comfortable, furnished simply but well. Curtains hung at the windows, and the smell of something savory cooking filled the air. "The guest room is upstairs, first door on the right," Mrs. Carson said, leading the way up a narrow staircase. "It's small but comfortable. There's a basin and pitcher for washing, and I'll heat some water so you can have a proper bath after supper. I imagine you'd like to get out of that dress." Sarah looked down at her ruined traveling dress and nodded. "I have another dress in my valise, but I don't have much else. The outlaws took my trunk off the stagecoach." "We'll sort that out," Mrs. Carson said practically, pushing open the door to a small bedroom with a narrow bed covered in a colorful quilt. "For now, just rest a bit before supper. I'll call you when it's ready." Left alone in the quiet room, Sarah sank down onto the edge of the bed and finally let herself feel the full weight of what had happened. She'd survived an attack that killed 3 people. She'd lost almost everything she owned. And now she was dependent on the charity of strangers, the very situation she'd sworn she'd never allow herself to be in after watching her mother's spirit break from having to rely on others. But she was alive, and that had to count for something. Sarah stood and opened her valise, pulling out her one other dress, a simple blue cotton that was wrinkled but clean. She changed quickly, finger combing her hair and pinning it back into some semblance of order. When she looked in the small mirror hanging on the wall, she saw a pale, hollow-eyed woman who looked older than her 21 years. A knock on the door made her turn. "Yes, supper's ready, Miss Everett," Cole's voice came through the door. "No rush, but Mama wanted me to let you know." Sarah took a deep breath and opened the door. Cole stood in the hallway, having cleaned up from the day's work. His hair was damp and he'd changed into a fresh shirt. "Thank you. I'll come down now." The dining room was modest, with a sturdy table that could seat 6. Mrs. Carson had set 3 places, and the food she'd prepared looked hearty and plentiful. Roasted chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, and green beans from what must have been a kitchen garden. Sarah's stomach growled, reminding her how long it had been since she'd eaten. "Sit anywhere you like, dear, Mrs. Carson said, bringing a pitcher of water to the table. "We don't stand on ceremony here." Sarah sat across from Cole, who waited until both women were seated before serving himself. The small courtesy surprised her. Most men she'd known would have filled their plates first without thinking twice about it. "Cole told me you're going to be a school teacher in Alamosa," Mrs. Carson said as they ate. "That's wonderful. We need more educated women in this territory. What made you choose teaching?" Sarah swallowed a bite of potato before answering. "My mother was a teacher before she married. She taught me to read and write when I was young. After she died, I realized it was the one skill I had that could earn me a respectable living without depending on anyone else." "Your father, Mrs. Carson asked gently, "Dead as well, 3 years ago." Sarah's tone made it clear she didn't want to discuss it further, and Mrs. Carson, bless her, took the hint and changed the subject. The conversation shifted to safer topics as they ate. Mrs. Carson talked about the ranch, about how Cole's father had started it 20 years ago and built it into one of the more successful operations in the area before he died 5 years back. Cole added details here and there, but mostly he just listened, occasionally glancing at Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite read. After supper, Mrs. Carson shooed them both out of the kitchen while she cleaned up, despite Sarah's offer to help. "You've had a terrible day, dear. Go sit on the porch and get some fresh air. Cole will keep you company." Sarah followed Cole outside to a wide porch that wrapped around the front of the house. The sun had set, and the sky was painted in shades of purple and deep blue, with the first stars beginning to appear. Cole settled into a rocking chair and gestured to another one beside it. "Your mother is very kind," Sarah said, sitting down carefully. "You both are. I'm not used to people being kind without wanting something in return." Cole was quiet for a moment, the only sound the creaking of his rocking chair. "That's a hard way to live, Miss Everett, not trusting anyone." "It's kept me safe," Sarah replied, but even as she said it, she wondered if it was true. Safe from what? Disappointment? Betrayal? Maybe. But also safe from connection, from support, from all the things that made life bearable. "Can I ask you something?" Cole's voice was thoughtful. "And you don't have to answer if you don't want to. Go ahead. You said earlier that every promise gets broken eventually. What happened to make you believe that?" Sarah stared out at the darkening landscape, debating how much to reveal. But something about the quiet evening and Cole's non-judgmental presence made her want to talk, to finally say out loud the things she'd kept bottled up for so long. "My father made a lot of promises," she said slowly. "He promised my mother he'd stop gambling. He promised we wouldn't lose our home. He promised that things would get better, that he'd change, that he'd take care of us. Every single promise was a lie. He gambled until there was nothing left, and then he drank himself to death because he couldn't face what he'd done. My mother worked herself sick trying to keep us afloat, taking in laundry and mending, anything to earn a few coins. She died 2 years ago from pneumonia because she was too worn down to fight it off. I'm sorry, Cole said quietly. That must have been incredibly hard. I learned from it, Sarah continued, surprised at how good it felt to finally speak these words to someone. I learned that you can't count on anyone but yourself. That loyalty is just a pretty word people use until something better comes along. My father was loyal to the bottle and the card table, not to us. And every man I've known since then has just confirmed what I already knew. People look out for themselves first, and everyone else can go to hell. Not everyone is like that, Cole said. Sarah turned to look at him, her expression skeptical. Aren't they? Tell me honestly, if helping me started to cost you something, if it became inconvenient or risky, wouldn't you eventually decide I wasn't worth the trouble? Cole met her eyes steadily. No, I wouldn't. When I make a commitment to something, I see it through. When I give my word, I keep it. And when someone needs help, I don't calculate the cost before offering it. Easy to say, Sarah said, but without the harsh edge she might have used earlier. Harder to prove. Then I guess I'll just have to prove it, Cole replied simply. They sat in silence for a while, rocking gently in their chairs, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. Despite her determination to remain wary, Sarah found herself relaxing slightly. The exhaustion of the day was catching up with her, making her eyelids heavy. I should let you get some rest, Cole said, standing. Tomorrow, if you're feeling up to it, I can take you back into town to speak with the stage company about arranging your passage to Alamosa. Thank you, Sarah said, standing as well, for everything today. Even if I don't understand why you're doing it. Cole smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and less serious. Maybe by the time you leave for Alamosa, you will. Sarah made her way upstairs to the guest room, where she found that Mrs. Carson had left a basin of warm water and a clean towel for washing. The simple thoughtfulness of the gesture made her throat tight with unexpected emotion. She washed quickly, then climbed into the narrow bed, certain that sleep would elude her after the trauma of the day. But exhaustion won out over troubled thoughts, and she fell asleep almost immediately, sleeping more deeply than she had in months. She woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon drifting up from downstairs. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was, and panic surged through her until memory returned. The Carson Ranch. Safety, at least for now. Sarah dressed and made her way downstairs to find Mrs. Carson in the kitchen, cooking breakfast. Good morning, dear. Did you sleep well? Better than I expected, Sarah admitted. Can I help with anything? You can set the table if you'd like. Cole's already out doing morning chores, but he'll be in shortly. Mrs. Carson handed her plates and utensils, and Sarah found herself falling into an easy rhythm of helping prepare the morning meal. When Cole came in, his boots dusty and his shirt sleeves rolled up, he greeted them both with a nod and washed up at the basin by the back door before sitting down to eat. The morning meal was quiet but comfortable, and Sarah found herself watching the easy interaction between mother and son, the obvious affection and respect they had for each other. After breakfast, Cole turned to Sarah. I need to ride out and check on the herd in the north pasture this morning, but I can take you into town this afternoon if you'd like. Actually, Mrs. Carson interjected, I was thinking Sarah might like to stay here and rest for another day. She's been through something traumatic, and rushing off might not be the best thing. Besides, I could use some help with my herb garden if she's feeling up to it. Gives us a chance to get to know each other. Sarah opened her mouth to protest, to say she didn't want to impose any further, but Mrs. Carson gave her a look that was both kind and knowing. "It's not an imposition, dear. It's nice having another woman around the house. Cole is wonderful company, but he doesn't want to discuss recipes or fabric patterns." Cole laughed. "That's true enough. But it's your choice, Miss Everett. Whatever you're comfortable with." Sarah found herself agreeing to stay another day, though she couldn't quite explain why. Maybe it was the comfortable warmth of the house, so different from the cold boarding houses she'd lived in for the past 2 years. Maybe it was Mrs. Carson's genuine friendliness. Or maybe it was the way Cole looked at her, like she was a person worth caring about rather than a burden to be managed. After Cole headed out to work, Sarah spent the morning helping Mrs. Carson in the garden, learning about the various herbs she grew for cooking and medicine. The older woman chatted easily as they worked, sharing stories about the ranch and the surrounding area, never prying into Sarah's past, but making it clear she was willing to listen if Sarah wanted to talk. "Cole's father and I started this ranch with nothing but a wagon full of supplies and a lot of hope," Mrs. Carson said as they pulled weeds from around a patch of sage. "Those first few years were hard. We nearly lost everything twice, once to drought and once to a harsh winter that killed half our herd. But we kept going, because that's what you do when you've committed to something. You don't give up just because it gets difficult." "Not everyone thinks that way," Sarah said quietly. "A lot of people cut their losses and run when things get hard." Mrs. Carson looked at her thoughtfully. "Some do, yes, but not everyone. The trick is figuring out who's worth trusting and who isn't. It's not always easy, but there are signs if you know what to look for." "What kind of signs?" "Actions, mostly. Talk is cheap, as they say. Anyone can make promises. But when someone shows up day after day, when they do what they said they would even when it costs them something, when they put other people's needs ahead of their own comfort, that's when you know they are trustworthy." Mrs. Carson pulled up a stubborn weed with a satisfied grunt. "My husband was like that, and I raised my son to be the same way." Sarah thought about this as they continued working. She wanted to believe that such people existed, but her experience told her otherwise. Still, she had to admit that Cole and his mother had shown her nothing but kindness since yesterday, asking for nothing in return. They were preparing lunch when Cole returned, looking hot and dusty from his morning's work. "The herd looks good," he reported, washing up before joining them at the table. "Found a few places where the fence needs repair, though. I'll work on that this afternoon." "I can help," Sarah heard herself offer, "if you need an extra set of hands." Cole looked surprised but pleased. "I won't say no to help, but you don't have to feel obligated." "I know," Sarah said, "but I'd rather be useful than sit around feeling like a charity case." So that afternoon found Sarah trailing after Cole to the far edge of the property, where several fence posts had come loose and needed to be reset. He showed her how to hold the posts steady while he tamped earth around them, how to string the wire tight and secure it properly. It was hot, sweaty work, but Sarah found it satisfying in a way that surprised her. As they worked, Cole talked about the ranch, about his plans to expand the herd and maybe get some better breeding stock. He spoke with real passion about the land and the work, and Sarah found herself asking questions, genuinely curious despite herself. "You really love this place, don't you?" she said, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. "I do," Cole admitted. "My father built something real here, something that will last. When I was younger, I thought about leaving, seeing what else was out there. But the more I traveled, the more I realized this is where I belong. This land, this work, it matters to me." "What about family?" Sarah asked before she could stop herself. "Don't you want a wife, children?" Cole was quiet for a moment, focusing intently on securing a section of wire. "I do, someday, but I've been waiting for the right woman. Someone who could love this place the way I do, who'd want to build a life here. Someone strong and smart, not just pretty but with substance to her. Sarah felt her cheeks warm and told herself it was just from the sun. That seems like a lot to ask for. Maybe, Cole said, straightening up and meeting her eyes. But I'd rather be alone than settle for less than what I know is possible. They finished the fence work as the sun began to sink lower in the sky, then made their way back to the house. Sarah's muscles ached from the unaccustomed labor, but it was a good ache, the kind that came from accomplishment rather than hardship. Over the next few days, a pattern developed. Sarah would help Mrs. Carson with household tasks in the mornings, then work alongside Cole in the afternoons, mending fences, moving cattle, or tackling whatever other tasks the ranch required. In the evenings, the three of them would sit on the porch, talking or simply enjoying the cool air after the day's heat. Sarah found herself relaxing bit by bit, her automatic suspicion slowly giving way to something she was almost afraid to name. Trust, maybe, or at least the beginning of it. On the fourth day of her stay, Cole took her back into town to check with the stage company about arranging passage to Alamosa. The clerk informed them that a stage would be running that route in 2 days, and that the company would indeed provide her with a seat free of charge once they verified her story with the sheriff. "So you'll be leaving in 2 days," Cole said as they walked back to the wagon. His tone was neutral, but something in his expression suggested he wasn't pleased by the news. "That was always the plan," Sarah reminded him, but even as she said it, she felt an unexpected reluctance. The Carson Ranch had started to feel less like temporary shelter and more like home, a realization that both comforted and terrified her. That evening, as they sat on the porch after supper, Cole seemed quieter than usual. Mrs. Carson had retired early with a headache, leaving them alone in the gathering dusk. "Can I ask you something, Miss Everett?" Cole said finally. "I've been helping you fix fences for days now. I think you can call me Sarah." Cole smiled slightly. "Sarah, then. What I want to ask is, why are you in such a hurry to leave? And before you say it's because you have a job waiting, I know that's not the whole truth. You could write to the school board, explain what happened. They'd understand if you needed to start a few weeks late." Sarah's first instinct was to deflect, to give him some easy answer that would end the conversation. But she found she didn't want to lie to Cole. He'd been nothing but honest with her. He deserved the same in return. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "I'm scared that if I stay longer, I'll start to depend on this place, on your mother's kindness on you. And then one day it'll all be pulled away, and I'll be right back where I started with nothing and no one." "Or," Cole said gently, "you could stay and find out that not everyone leaves. That some things, some people, are exactly what they seem to be." "I don't know if I can believe that," Sarah whispered. "I've been disappointed too many times." Cole was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful and measured. "My father used to say that the definition of loyalty isn't standing by someone when it's easy. It's standing by them when it's hard, when it would be simpler to walk away. Anyone can make promises, Sarah. What matters is who keeps them when keeping them costs something." "And you think you're that kind of person?" Sarah asked, not challenging, just genuinely curious. "I know I am," Cole said. "And I think if you give me a chance, I can prove it to you." Sarah's heart was beating faster than it should. "What are you saying, Cole?" He turned to face her fully, his expression earnest in the fading light. "I'm saying that I've come to care about you over these past few days. I'm saying that I'd like you to consider staying, not as a guest, but as someone who belongs here. I'm saying that if you'll give me time, I'll show you that loyalty isn't just a word people throw around. It's a choice you make every single day, and it's a choice I'm willing to make." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes and she blinked them back furiously. "You barely know me. How can you say these things?" "I know you well enough," Cole said. "I know you're strong and smart. I know you work hard and don't complain. I know you've been hurt badly by people who should have protected you, and that's made you wary of everyone. But I also know that underneath all that suspicion and self-protection, there's someone who wants to believe that good people exist. Someone who wants to trust again but doesn't know how." He was right, and that scared her more than anything. Sarah stood abruptly, wrapping her arms around herself. "I can't, Cole. I can't stay here and wait for the day when you realize I'm more trouble than I'm worth. I can't invest in something that's just going to fall apart." Cole stood as well but made no move to touch her. "I'm not asking you to stay forever, Sarah. I'm just asking you to give me a chance to prove myself. Stay another week, 2 weeks, however long you need to feel confident that when I say I'm loyal, I mean it. And if I still don't believe you after that, then I'll take you to a Lamosa myself and wish you well," Cole said simply. "No hard feelings, no guilt, but at least you'll know that you gave yourself the chance to find out if I'm telling the truth." Sarah wanted to refuse. Every instinct she'd developed over years of disappointment told her to leave while she still could, before she got any more attached to this place and these people. But another part of her, a part she tried hard to bury, wanted desperately to believe that Cole meant what he said. "1 week," she heard herself say. "I'll stay 1 more week, but I'm not making any promises about after that." Cole's face broke into a smile that made her stomach flutter. "That's all I'm asking for. 1 week to show you that loyalty isn't just a pretty word." The next day, Cole took Sarah to see more of the ranch, riding out on horseback to check distant sections of fence and water sources. Sarah hadn't ridden much, but Cole was patient, giving her a gentle mare and showing her the basics. As they rode through the high mountain meadows, with wildflowers blooming in impossible profusion and the peaks rising dramatic and snow capped in the distance, Sarah felt something in her chest loosen slightly. "It's beautiful here," she said, pulling her horse to a stop on a rise that overlooked the valley. "It is," Cole agreed, stopping beside her. "My father chose this spot because he said it reminded him of possibility. All this open land ready for someone to work it and make it into something." "Do you think he'd be proud of what you've done with it?" Sarah asked. "I hope so," Cole said. "I've tried to honor his vision while making it my own. He taught me that land like this demands respect and hard work, but it rewards both if you're willing to put in the effort." As they rode back toward the house, Sarah found herself thinking about roots, about what it would mean to have a place that was truly hers. She'd been running for so long, moving from one temporary situation to another, never allowing herself to get attached because attachment meant vulnerability. But watching Cole work his land, seeing the pride and care he took in every task, she began to wonder if maybe vulnerability wasn't always weakness. Maybe sometimes it was the price of having something real, something worth keeping. That evening, Sheriff Wheeler rode out to the ranch with news. The gang that had attacked the stagecoach had been caught attempting to rob a freight wagon 20 miles north. There had been a shootout, and 2 of the outlaws were dead, while the other 2 were now in custody awaiting trial. "Thought you'd want to know, Miss Everett," the sheriff said, accepting a cup of coffee from Mrs. Carson. "You won't need to worry about running into them again." Sarah felt relief wash over her, followed quickly by a complicated tangle of other emotions. The immediate danger was over, which should make it easier to continue on to Alamosa. But she realized with surprise that she wasn't ready to leave yet, not after giving Cole her promise of 1 week. The days that followed took on a rhythm that felt both foreign and deeply right to Sarah. She woke each morning to the sounds of the ranch coming to life, helped Mrs. Carson with breakfast, then spent her days working alongside Cole or learning more about ranch management from his mother. In the evenings, they would all sit together, talking and laughing, and Sarah found herself sharing stories from her childhood that she'd kept locked away for years. Cole kept his word about giving her space while still making his intentions clear. He didn't push her for more than she was ready to give, but his actions spoke volumes. When her boots began to wear through, he rode into town and came back with a new pair, claiming he'd needed to go anyway, and it was no trouble. When she mentioned missing books, having left her small collection behind in the robbery, he produced several volumes from his own shelves, telling her his mother had enjoyed them and thought she might as well. The small acts of thoughtfulness piled up, each one chipping away at the walls Sarah had built around her heart. But what impressed her most was the way Cole treated everyone around him with the same steady respect and consideration. He was patient with the ranch hands who worked for him, fair in his dealings with neighbors and merchants in town, and unfailingly kind to his mother. This wasn't a performance for Sarah's benefit. This was simply who he was. On the 6th day of her extended stay, a storm rolled in from the mountains, bringing driving rain and wind that rattled the windows. Cole came in from securing the animals, soaked to the skin despite his rain slicker. "Everything's battened down," he reported, stripping off the wet coat in the mudroom. "But we're in for a rough night of it." The storm raged through the evening, making conversation on the porch impossible. Instead, they gathered in the parlor, where Mrs. Carson worked on mending while Cole reviewed his account books. Sarah sat with one of the borrowed books, but found she couldn't concentrate on the words. She kept glancing at Cole, watching the way the lamplight played across his features, the way his brow furrowed slightly as he worked through his calculations. "I can feel you watching me," Cole said without looking up, but there was amusement in his voice. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "Sorry. I was just thinking." "About what?" Cole set down his pen and gave her his full attention. Sarah hesitated, aware that Mrs. Carson was listening even though she appeared focused on her sewing. "About loyalty, about what it really means." "And what do you think it means?" Cole asked. "I think," Sarah said slowly, working through the thoughts as she spoke them, "that I've been confusing loyalty with perfection. I've been waiting for people to never make mistakes, to never disappoint me in any way. And when they inevitably did, because everyone is human and humans make mistakes, I took it as proof that loyalty doesn't exist." "But," Cole prompted gently when she paused, "but real loyalty isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up anyway, day after day, even when it's hard. It's about keeping promises even when breaking them would be easier. It's about choosing to stay when leaving would be simpler." Sarah met Cole's eyes across the room. "You've been doing that all week. You've been showing me through your actions what loyalty looks like." Cole's expression was soft and hopeful. "Does that mean you're starting to believe me?" "I'm starting to," Sarah admitted. "It's still hard. There's still a voice in my head telling me not to trust this, not to trust you, but it's getting quieter." "That's all I can ask for," Cole said. "I know I can't undo all the hurt you've experienced in a week or even a month, but I hope that given enough time, I can show you that not everyone is like the people who let you down." Mrs. Carson cleared her throat gently. "If you'll both excuse me, I'm going to head up to bed. This storm is giving me a headache." She gave Sarah a knowing smile as she passed. "Good night, dear." After Mrs. Carson left, the room felt smaller, more intimate. Sarah set aside her book and moved to sit in the chair closer to Cole's desk. "Can I ask you something? Anything?" "Why me?" Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. "You could have taken me to the sheriff and left it at that. You didn't have to bring me here, didn't have to let me stay, didn't have to care what happened to me after. So why?" Cole was quiet for a moment, clearly choosing his words carefully. Honestly. At first, it was just because you needed help and I could give it. But then I talked to you, and I heard how you viewed the world, how much you'd been hurt, and I wanted to show you that you were wrong. Not to prove a point, but because I hated the idea of you going through life believing that no one could be trusted. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his blue eyes intense. And then I got to know you better, and I realized I didn't just want to prove you wrong. I wanted to be the person who stood by you, who showed you every day that you're worth standing by. I started to care about you, Sarah, more than I probably should have in such a short time, but I can't help it. Sarah's heart was racing. Cole, I'm not sure I know how to do this. How to let myself care about someone without waiting for them to leave. You don't have to figure it all out at once, Cole said, standing and moving to kneel beside her chair so they were at eye level. We can take it as slow as you need. I'm not going anywhere, Sarah. That's a promise, and I keep my promises. Sarah reached out tentatively and touched his face, feeling the slight roughness of stubble under her fingertips. I want to believe you, she whispered. I want to believe this is real. It is real, Cole said, covering her hand with his own. And I'll prove it to you every day for as long as it takes. That's what loyalty means, Sarah. It means I'm choosing you, and I'll keep choosing you, today and tomorrow and every day after. The tears Sarah had been fighting finally spilled over, running down her cheeks. But these weren't tears of pain or loss. They were tears of relief, of a burden she'd been carrying for years finally starting to lift. Cole wiped them away gently with his thumb. It's all right to cry. It's all right to feel whatever you're feeling. I'm scared, Sarah admitted. I'm terrified that I'm going to let myself believe this, and then one day I'll wake up and it'll all be gone. I can't promise that bad things won't happen, Cole said honestly. Life brings hardship and loss, but I can promise that whatever comes, I'll face it with you. I won't run when things get hard, I won't break my word, and I won't ever make you feel like you're not worth staying for. Sarah leaned forward and rested her forehead against Cole's, her eyes closed, breathing in the moment. One day at a time, she whispered. Can we try that? One day at a time, and maybe eventually I'll stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. One day at a time, Cole agreed. For as many days as it takes. They stayed like that as the storm raged outside, finding peace in each other's presence. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Sarah allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd found someone who meant what he said. The weeks Sarah had promised turned into 2, then 3. She wrote to the school board in Alamosa, explaining the circumstances and asking if they could hold the position for her, until she was certain she was ready to leave. They wrote back with understanding and patience, saying the job would be there when she was ready. But as summer deepened into early autumn, Sarah found herself less and less certain she wanted to leave at all. The Carson ranch had become home in a way nowhere else ever had. She knew the rhythms of the place now, knew which cattle were prone to wandering and which horses had the best temperaments. She'd helped Mrs. Carson preserve vegetables from the garden, had ridden with Cole to check on distant pastures, had even helped deliver a breech calf in the middle of the night, working alongside Cole until they'd both been exhausted but triumphant. Cole continued to prove his loyalty in countless small ways. When Sarah came down with a bad cold, he rode through a rainstorm to fetch medicine from town, refusing to wait for better weather because he wanted her to be comfortable. When she received a letter from a cousin she hadn't heard from in years, asking for money, Cole didn't judge or advise but simply listened as she worked through her conflicted feelings about family who'd abandoned her when she needed them most. And when Sarah finally broke down one evening, and told him everything about her father's gambling and her mother's slow death from overwork and poverty. Cole held her while she cried and never once suggested she should forgive or forget. He simply validated her pain and assured her that she'd never face that kind of betrayal from him. It was in early September, on a crisp morning with autumn just starting to paint the aspen trees gold, that Sarah realized she was in love with Cole Carson. Not just attracted to him or grateful for his kindness, but genuinely, deeply in love. The realization hit her as she watched him work with a young horse in the corral, his movements patient and gentle, his voice low and soothing as he earned the animal's trust. He was doing with the horse exactly what he'd been doing with her, she realized. Showing up consistently, proving through action that he could be trusted, never forcing but always offering, giving space but never giving up. And it had worked. Her walls had come down without her even noticing, and now he was in her heart in a way that should have terrified her but somehow didn't. That evening, after supper, Sarah asked Cole to walk with her. They strolled away from the house, up a small rise that overlooked the ranch buildings and the valley beyond. The setting sun painted everything in shades of amber and rose. "Cole," Sarah said, stopping at the top of the rise and turning to face him. "I need to tell you something." She saw a flicker of worry cross his face, quickly suppressed. "All right. When I first came here, I was so sure I knew how the world worked. I was certain that loyalty was a lie people told themselves, that everyone eventually looked out for themselves first, that trusting anyone was just setting myself up to be hurt again." Sarah took a deep breath. "You've spent the past 2 months proving me wrong about all of that." "Sarah, let me finish," she interrupted gently. "You asked me weeks ago to give you time to prove that loyalty isn't just a word. You've done that, Cole. Every single day, you've shown me through your actions what it means to be loyal, to be trustworthy, to be someone worth believing in. And I do believe in you now. More than that, I love you." Cole's face transformed with joy, but before he could speak, Sarah held up her hand. "But I need you to know that I'm still learning how to do this. I'm still going to have moments where I'm scared, where old habits kick in and I want to run or push you away. I might not always be easy to love." "Good thing I'm not looking for easy," Cole said, pulling her into his arms. "I'm looking for real, Sarah. And this, you and me, this is the most real thing I've ever felt." He kissed her then, and Sarah let herself fall into it without reservation, without holding part of herself back in case she needed to protect her heart. Because she'd finally learned that real love, real loyalty, required vulnerability, required trust, required the willingness to believe that not everyone would hurt you, that some people really did keep their promises. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me, Sarah. Build a life with me here. Let me spend every day for the rest of our lives proving that you made the right choice in trusting me." Sarah felt tears on her cheeks again, but she was smiling through them. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you," they told Mrs. Carson when they returned to the house, and she cried happy tears and immediately began planning a wedding. "Nothing too fancy," she said, wiping her eyes, "but nice enough to mark the occasion properly. And we should invite the neighbors, let everyone meet Sarah properly as Cole's bride." The wedding took place 6 weeks later, in early October, when the aspens were at their golden peak. It was a simple ceremony held at the ranch, with the Methodist minister from Manassas officiating and about 30 neighbors and friends in attendance. Sarah wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Mrs. Carson had helped her sew, and Cole wore his best suit, looking handsome and nervous in equal measure. As Sarah stood beside Cole and spoke her vows, promising to love and honor him, She thought about how far she'd come from the broken, suspicious woman who'd stumbled into Manasseh 4 months ago. She'd learned that loyalty wasn't a fairy tale, that promises could be kept, that trusting someone didn't automatically mean being betrayed. And when Cole spoke his vows, his voice strong and clear, his eyes never leaving hers, she knew with absolute certainty that he meant every word. He would stand by her through whatever came, would prove his loyalty not just in grand gestures but in the thousand small choices of daily life. That was the kind of man he was, the kind of man he'd shown himself to be from the very first day. Their wedding night was gentle and sweet, Cole taking his time to show Sarah that physical intimacy could be about trust and connection, rather than something to be endured or feared. They made love in the big bedroom that had been Cole's alone but was now theirs, and Sarah fell asleep in her husband's arms feeling safer than she'd ever felt in her life. The years that followed brought both joy and hardship, as life always does. Sarah helped run the ranch alongside Cole, discovering she had a talent for managing accounts and dealing with buyers. Together, they expanded the operation, buying additional land and improving their breeding stock. Mrs. Carson remained a steady presence, helping with the household and becoming not just a mother-in-law but a true friend to Sarah. Their first child, a son they named James, was born in the summer of 1884. Sarah went into labor during a particularly hot afternoon, and Cole stayed by her side through every minute of it, holding her hand and offering support even when she squeezed hard enough to leave marks. When the midwife finally placed the baby in Sarah's arms, Cole looked at his wife and son with such love and wonder that Sarah felt her heart might burst from fullness. James was followed by a daughter, Catherine, 2 years later, and then another son, Thomas, 3 years after that. The house rang with the sounds of children playing and laughing, so different from the quiet, tense homes Sarah had known growing up. She and Cole worked hard to give their children what neither of them had been entirely sure existed: a stable, loving home where promises were kept and loyalty was demonstrated every day. There were hard times, too. A harsh winter in 1887 killed part of the herd and nearly bankrupted them, requiring Cole to take a loan from the bank and work twice as hard to rebuild. Sarah never once heard him complain or suggest giving up. He simply put his head down and did what needed to be done, and Sarah worked beside him, proving her own loyalty through the difficult season. Mrs. Carson's health began to fail when she reached her 60s, and Sarah cared for her with the same dedication Mrs. Carson had once shown her. In her final days, the older woman took Sarah's hand and said, "I always prayed Cole would find someone strong enough to stand beside him and smart enough to see what kind of man he is. I'm so grateful he found you, dear." "I'm grateful you both gave me a chance when I didn't deserve it," Sarah replied, tears streaming down her face. "You always deserved it," Mrs. Carson said firmly. "You just needed someone to show you that." When Mrs. Carson passed peacefully in her sleep a few days later, Sarah and Cole grieved together, supporting each other through the loss. It was a testament to the strength of their marriage that they could share both joy and sorrow, each one making the other stronger. As their children grew, Sarah made sure they understood the value of loyalty, of keeping promises, of being people whose word meant something. She told them stories about their father's steadfast nature, about how he'd proven himself trustworthy when she'd been certain no such thing existed. And Cole, for his part, modeled those values every day, showing his children through action rather than lecture what it meant to be a person of integrity. James grew into a young man who wanted to continue ranching, working alongside his father and learning the business from the ground up. Catherine showed academic promise and talked about becoming a teacher, following in her grandmother's footsteps. Thomas, still young, seemed to have inherited his father's patience with animals and spent hours in the barn with the horses. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Cole took Sarah back to the rise where she'd first told him she loved him. It was October again, the aspens golden just as they'd been on their wedding day. The ranch spread out below them, prosperous and peaceful, the result of years of hard work and dedication. "Do you remember what you said to me that day?" Cole asked, his arm around Sarah's waist. "I remember I told you I loved you," Sarah said, leaning into him, "and that I was still scared but willing to try. And now," Sarah smiled, looking up at her husband, "now I'm not scared anymore." "You've proven yourself to me 1,000 times over, Cole. Every day for 10 years, you've shown me what loyalty looks like. You've kept every promise, stood by me through everything, been exactly who you said you'd be." "That's not going to change," Cole said, kissing her temple. "I'll be proving it for the next 50 years if I have my way." "I believe you," Sarah said simply, and she did with every fiber of her being. The suspicious, guarded woman who'd stumbled into Manasseh a decade ago was gone, replaced by someone who knew down to her bones what it meant to be loved loyally and completely. They stood together on that rise as the sun set, just as they'd done so many times before, drawing strength and comfort from each other's presence. Below them, their children played in the yard while smoke rose from the chimney of the house that had become Sarah's true home. It was a life built on the foundation of loyalty proven through action, of promises kept day after day, year after year. As they walked back down the hill hand in hand, Sarah thought about how wrong she'd been about the world all those years ago. Loyalty wasn't a lie or a pretty word people used carelessly. It was real, tangible, demonstrated through the choices people made when it would be easier to choose differently. It was showing up when things were hard, keeping faith when doubt crept in, staying when leaving would be simpler. Cole had taught her that, not through words but through a decade of consistent, faithful action. He'd proven his loyalty so thoroughly that Sarah's old cynicism seemed like a bad dream, something that had happened to a different person in a different lifetime. She'd been transformed by being loved well, by being shown day after day that she was worth staying for. The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and new joys. The ranch continued to prosper under their management. James married a local girl, a rancher's daughter named Emily, and they built a house on the edge of the property. Catherine did indeed become a teacher, taking a position at the school in Manasseh and boarding with a family in town during the week. Thomas developed a reputation as one of the best horse trainers in the region, with people coming from miles around to have him work with their animals. Sarah and Cole grew older together, their faces gaining lines and their hair going gray, but the connection between them only deepened with time. They'd built something real and lasting, a partnership based on mutual respect, demonstrated loyalty, and deep love. On quiet evenings, they would sit on the porch just as they had in those early days, rocking gently in their chairs, content in each other's company. "I was thinking about something today," Sarah said one such evening, when they were both in their 50s and their youngest child was preparing to head east to college. "What's that?" Cole asked, reaching over to take her hand. "That girl who showed up here covered in blood and terrified, certain the world was full of people who couldn't be trusted. I was thinking about how different my life would have been if you'd just taken me to the sheriff and left me there." Sarah squeezed his hand. "You saved me, Cole. Not just from physical danger, but from a life of never trusting anyone, never letting anyone close, never knowing what it felt like to be truly loved." Cole brought her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "You saved yourself, Sarah." You were brave enough to give me a chance when everything in your experience told you not to. You chose to stay, chose to trust, chose to build this life with me. I just made it easy to make those choices." "You made it possible," Sarah corrected. "Before you, I didn't even know what real loyalty looked like. I'd never seen it demonstrated the way you demonstrated it, every single day." "And I'll keep demonstrating it," Cole said, his voice warm with affection and promise. "Until my last breath, Sarah." "That's a promise I made when I married you, and it's one I intend to keep." Sarah looked at her husband, at the man who'd proven himself worthy of trust over and over again for more than 20 years, and felt profound gratitude wash over her. She'd been given a gift she'd never thought to ask for, a partner who meant what he said, who backed up his words with action, who showed his love and loyalty not through grand gestures but through the steady, faithful work of building a life together. "I love you," she said simply. "Thank you for never giving me a reason to doubt that." "I love you too," Cole replied, "and I never will." As the sun set over the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Sarah Everett Carson sat on the porch of her home, surrounded by the tangible proof of a life well lived and promises well kept. She'd learned the most important lesson of her life within these walls, that loyalty was real, demonstrable, and worth believing in. More than that, she'd learned that she was worthy of that loyalty, worthy of being chosen day after day by a man who kept his promises. The scared, suspicious girl who'd arrived in Manassas all those years ago had been healed by consistent, faithful love. And in turn, she'd loved Cole and their children with the same fierce loyalty he'd shown her, proving that what had once seemed impossible was actually the most natural thing in the world when you found the right person. Their story wasn't one of dramatic declarations or sweeping romantic gestures. It was quieter than that, built on the foundation of daily choices, of showing up when it mattered, of keeping faith through both easy times and hard. It was the story of a man who'd promised to prove his loyalty through action, and had done exactly that for 25 years and counting. And it was the story of a woman who'd learned to trust again, slowly and carefully, one day at a time. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared in the vast Colorado sky, Sarah and Cole rose from their rocking chairs and went inside together, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring, secure in the knowledge that they would face it side by side. That was loyalty. That was love. That was the promise they'd made and kept, and would continue keeping for all the years they had left. The Carson Ranch continued to thrive for another generation, and then another, a lasting legacy of what could be built when two people chose each other and kept choosing each other, day after day, year after year. And it all started because a rancher had seen a woman in need and chosen to help, then chosen to stay, then chosen to love, proving through action what his words promised. Sarah had whispered once that she'd never known loyalty, believing it to be nothing more than a pretty lie. Cole Carson had spent the rest of his life proving her wrong, showing her through every action, every choice, every day that loyalty was real and enduring and worth believing in. And in doing so, he'd given her not just a home, not just a family, but the gift of trust restored and hope renewed. That was their story, simple and true, and thoroughly proven through a lifetime of faithful love.